My name is Riley Hart. I'm 28 years old, and this is the story of how I was raised, erased, and then reborn. All because of one phone call my mother forgot to end. I still remember the look in my father's eyes when he sat me down at the kitchen table that day. I was only 8, but something in me knew we were crossing a line that would change everything. Dad's voice, once full of booming laughter and bedtime stories, came out barely above a whisper. "Sweetheart," he said, gripping my tiny hand in his trembling one, "I have something to tell you." I couldn't understand what stage 4 meant. I just knew it was something that made Mom cry behind locked doors at night. I knew it meant my father, the strongest man in my world, wouldn't be around much longer. By the time I was 10, the man who once lifted me onto his shoulders had been reduced to a hospital bed in our living room, surrounded by beeping machines and the faint smell of antiseptic. And then one morning he was just gone. The funeral was a gray blur. Cold air. People I didn't know handing me tissues. And my mother squeezing my hand so tightly it left marks. A week later, while the scent of lilies still hung in the air and his slippers were still by the back door, my mom sat me down on the same couch where Dad used to read the Sunday paper. Her hands twisted in her lap like she was choking on her own decision. "Riley, I think it's best if you go stay with Grandma Lily for a little while," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Just until I can get back on my feet." I didn't understand. My father had just died. Wasn't that when family stuck together? But instead, I was packed into Grandma Lily's old Honda the next morning, clutching my backpack and a photo of my dad. Mom promised it was temporary. "Just a few weeks," she said. "I just need to clear my head." But weeks turned into months, and months into years. She called sometimes, always with the same empty promise. "Just a little longer, Riley." Grandma Lily tried her best. Her house was warm. Her hugs were real. She never tried to replace Dad, but she never made me feel like I was a burden either. I remember how she'd cook pancakes in the shape of my initials, how she would read my dad's old comics to me when I couldn't sleep. I never said it out loud, but some nights I'd pray to God that Mom would just forget about me entirely so I could stay. And then one spring afternoon she came back. It was a Thursday. I was doing my math homework at the kitchen table when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. I looked out the window and saw her, my mother, stepping out of a black SUV, hair curled, makeup perfect like grief had never touched her. A man stayed in the driver's seat, engine still running. She burst through the door with a smile that looked borrowed from someone else's face. "Riley," she exclaimed. "I have wonderful news." I stood up, heart pounding. Part of me hoped she was here to take me home, that maybe she missed me as much as I had missed her. But her next words turned that hope to ash. "I'm getting married," she said, beaming. "His name is Dean. He has 2 daughters just your age. Our family will be complete again." Complete. As if I'd been an empty space waiting to be filled. Before I could protest, she was grabbing my things, shoving clothes into bags, dragging me toward the car. I remember glancing back at Grandma Lily standing in the doorway. Her eyes wide with quiet worry. She didn't stop us. She didn't argue. She just said, "Call me if you need anything, honey." That drive was the longest of my life. Mom didn't stop talking about the wedding, the house, the twins, but I barely heard her. When we pulled up to the house, Chloe and Madison were waiting on the steps like porcelain dolls. Matching dresses. Matching smirks. I tried to smile to be polite. "Hi, I'm Riley," I said. "Yeah, we know," Chloe replied, her voice honeyed and sharp. "Dad told us all about you," Madison added with a too sweet smile. Then Chloe leaned in close and whispered, "Just remember, Dad belongs to us. And now your mom does too." That night, I lay in the pink, glitter-drenched bedroom they called mine, curled up in the corner of a bed I didn't recognize, listening to the twins giggling on the other side of the room. The wallpaper was covered in crowns and cupcakes. There was no trace of me anywhere. I was a guest in my own life. And I hadn't even seen the worst of it yet. The wedding came faster than I could brace myself for. 3 months after moving into the pristine suburban house, Mom wore white again, and I stood in the background like a smudge on a perfect picture. Chloe and Madison sparkled in their bridesmaid dresses, their hair curled identically, their smiles wide for the camera. I wore a faded pale blue dress that barely fit, something Mom had picked off a clearance rack. In the photos, I'm easy to miss, slightly out of frame, slightly out of place. As if I didn't belong there at all. And maybe I didn't. Dean never looked at me the way a stepfather should. Not warmly. Not even neutrally. He barely looked at me at all. It was like I existed in the house but not in his mind. Mom, desperate to please her new husband and blended family, became someone I didn't recognize. She used to braid my hair. She used to bake my favorite lemon bars on Sundays. Now she spent her weekends shopping for Chloe and Madison's new outfits, planning dance recitals, and scheduling brunches with the other PTA moms. I was just there. At first I tried to fit in. I smiled when they gave me second-hand clothes. I laughed at Dean's dry jokes even when they weren't funny. I even offered to help Chloe and Madison with their school projects. But nothing I did ever seemed to be enough. If I was quiet, I was too moody. If I spoke up, I was too dramatic. Mom would say, "Riley, be grateful. Dean's trying." But he wasn't. Not once did he ask how I was adjusting. Not once did he say goodnight. His daughters got kisses and bedtime stories. I got locked doors and cold silences. The first Christmas in our new family was the final nail in the coffin. I remember sitting by the tree, watching Chloe and Madison tear into an avalanche of presents. Brand new iPads, glitter-covered shoes, limited edition headphones. When it was my turn, Mom handed me a single box wrapped in crumpled silver paper. Inside was an old model phone and 2 sweaters that smelled like they had just come out of a bargain bin. I swallowed my disappointment, smiled, and thanked her. But later, as I turned to put the phone away, I caught Madison smirking. "At least you got something," she whispered. "What more do you want?" A few days later, I came home from school to find the phone shattered on my bedroom floor. A crumpled note sat beside it. "No one needs leftovers in this house." My hands shook as I brought the pieces to Mom. She looked at them, sighed, and said, "Riley, you can't blame your sisters for everything. You need to grow up." That was the first time I felt something inside me snap. Not loudly, not yet. But like a hairline fracture, beginning to split open. Months passed like ghosts. I became a background fixture, like the rug or the lamp no one bothered to dust. I ate dinner at the edge of the table. I studied under a dim hallway light. I slept in a cramped corner of the room I now shared full-time with Chloe and Madison. They took over my desk, rummaged through my things, even ripped up a drawing I had spent days on for art class. When I told Mom, she said, "Don't be petty, Riley. They're just girls. Learn to share." The word began to rot in my mouth. On my 13th birthday, I got a cupcake and a side hug. Chloe got a party the next week with balloons, catering, and an Instagram slideshow. I stood by the doorway for most of it, holding a paper plate of untouched cake, pretending I didn't care. I had learned by then how to become invisible, how to exist without taking up space, without needing anything, without asking for love. Then came the pregnancy announcement. It was a spring afternoon. The windows were open, letting in a soft breeze. Mom called me into the living room. Dean was already there, arms crossed, that perpetual frown plastered on his face. Chloe and Madison peeked from around the corner, their grins shark-like. "Riley," Mom said carefully, "Dean and I have good news. We're having a baby. Little boy. You're going to be a big sister." I nodded numbly, trying to smile. But then she added, "We'll need to convert your room into a nursery. So you'll be moving back in full-time with Chloe and Madison. Just for a while." "No," I said. Quiet at first, then louder. "No, that's my room. Dad bought it for me." Dean narrowed his eyes. "That was a long time ago, Riley. Things change." Mom's voice turned sharp. "Don't be selfish." Something snapped. Not quietly this time. Loud. Clean. Unapologetic. "This isn't about sharing," I said, my voice shaking. "It's about you trying to erase me. You erased Dad. You erased who we were. And now you're pretending this is a family. It's not. It's a show." The room fell into stunned silence. Mom's face crumpled. Dean's jaw clenched. Chloe and Madison giggled softly behind the wall, as if they'd just watched their favorite character die in a movie. Dinner that night was wordless. I wasn't spoken to. I wasn't looked at. I was invisible again, but this time I welcomed it. It was easier than pretending. That night, I lay in bed listening to the soft hum of the baby monitor Mom had already set up, even though the baby hadn't been born yet. I stared at the ceiling and made a decision. 3 days later, I packed a small bag with clothes, my sketchbook, and the locket with Dad's photo. When the house fell quiet, I slipped out and dialed the one number I still trusted. Grandma Lily answered on the second ring. "Riley," she breathed. "I can't stay here anymore," I whispered. "Stay put," she said. "I'm coming." Half an hour later, her old headlights pierced the darkness outside. I walked out the front door. No one noticed. No one cared. I stepped into her arms like I was stepping into the past, a past filled with warmth and truth. She didn't ask for an explanation. She just held me tight. We drove through the night in silence. And for the first time in years I felt safe. The morning light streaming through the lace curtains in Grandma Lily's house felt like stepping back into a memory I thought I'd lost. The smell of cinnamon and fresh bread filled the air, just like it used to when I was little. I sat quietly at the kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a warm mug of cocoa, and tried to slow my heartbeat, to believe that I was safe and not just borrowing peace that would vanish again. Grandma placed her hand gently over mine. Her skin was rough from gardening, but her touch was steady and sure. "I called your mother," she said, eyes fixed on mine. "Told her you were here." I tensed, but she squeezed my hand. "She's not coming," she said. "She agreed to give up custody." My heart stopped. "You mean I can stay here?" Her eyes softened with the kind of love I hadn't seen in years. "Not just stay. I want to adopt you, Riley. Make it official. You don't have to be pushed around anymore. Not by anyone." The words hit me like a warm wave. I didn't cry from sadness. I cried from the overwhelming sense of finally being wanted. Not out of obligation, not because someone was trying to rebuild their life and needed me to fit into it like a misplaced puzzle piece, but because I was loved, fully, freely, fiercely. I clung to her and whispered, "Yes, I want that. I want to be your daughter." The adoption process wasn't complicated. My mother signed the papers without hesitation, not even a phone call, not a single question. As if she had been waiting for a way to let go without the guilt. And maybe she had. Maybe for her this was a relief. A way to finally start fresh, with the perfect new family she had always wanted. But for me it was a rebirth. At the hearing, the judge looked at me kindly as he declared that from that day forward, I was officially the daughter of Lily Harris. I signed the papers with trembling fingers, knowing that I was rewriting the story of my life, one signature at a time. I returned to school, back to the old neighborhood where some of the teachers still remembered my dad. They welcomed me with warm smiles and gentle words. I buried myself in my studies, not as a distraction but as a purpose. I was determined to make the second chance I'd been given count. In high school I earned honor roll every year. I didn't have many friends, but I didn't mind. Quiet suited me. I found joy in books, in painting, in volunteering at the local library. Every night, I came home to the scent of stew simmering on the stove and the sound of Grandma humming old jazz songs in the kitchen. Some nights we'd sit on the porch with mugs of tea, talking about Dad, her son, and the mischief he used to get into as a boy. It was during those talks that I started to understand just how much of him I still carried with me. When I turned 17, I applied to State University. I still remember the day the acceptance letter arrived. A thick envelope with the school's crest embossed in gold. I tore it open with shaking hands. Not only had I been accepted, but I had also received a partial scholarship for academic excellence. I ran to the kitchen where Grandma Lily was kneading dough. "Grandma, I got in," I cried, waving the letter. She looked up, and tears immediately welled in her eyes. She dropped the spoon and pulled me into the tightest hug. "You did it, Riley. Your dad would be so proud of you." That night, she pulled a worn folder from the top drawer of her desk. Inside were deposit slips, savings bonds, and notes scribbled in her careful handwriting. "After your father passed," she said, "I started saving, just in case. I didn't know if you'd ever come back to me. But I wanted to be ready if you did." When I saw the amount, I gasped. Between the scholarship and what she had saved, I had enough to cover almost all of my college tuition. I left for university in the fall. It was the first time I'd ever lived alone, truly alone. At night, I would lie awake in my dorm room, staring at the ceiling, missing the sound of Grandma Lily humming, the creak of the old floorboards, the warmth of her cocoa. But that longing only pushed me harder. I studied like my life depended on it. I worked part-time jobs. I interned during the summers. Every dollar I earned went back into my future, and every time I thought about quitting, I'd picture the way Grandma had looked at me when I opened that letter. 4 years passed in a blur. When I walked across the stage on graduation day, I wore my cap and gown with quiet pride. I had graduated with honors, top 10% of my class, and had already accepted a job offer from Clarendon and Pierce, one of the most competitive investment firms in the state. The job was fast-paced, demanding, and brutal at times. But I had learned how to survive storms. I threw myself into it. I worked late. I double-checked every spreadsheet, every presentation. Within 6 months, my supervisors began to take notice. Within a year, I was promoted. I had finally built something. A life, a future, a version of myself that couldn't be erased. And then the call came. It was a Thursday. I had just wrapped up a meeting when I saw the missed call from an unfamiliar number. I didn't think much of it. But when I listened to the voicemail, the blood drained from my face. It was Grandma's doctor. They had found a tumor. It was serious. I rushed home that same night, heart pounding in my chest, praying to anyone who might be listening that I hadn't waited too long. When I walked into the hospital room, there she was. Smaller than I remembered, thinner. But her eyes still sparkled, and her voice still had that familiar tease. "Don't look at me like that," she said with a weak smile. "I'm still waiting for you to make those cinnamon rolls." I laughed and cried at the same time, holding her hand like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. From that day on, I came back every weekend. I read to her, told her stories about work, shared my dreams. I watched as her body slowly gave in, but her spirit never did. She listened to every word I said like it mattered, like I mattered. On graduation day, when I received my final certificate for professional accreditation, she couldn't be there, but we streamed it to her hospital room. I walked across the stage, looked straight into the camera and smiled. That night, I returned to her side, still wearing my heels, clutching my diploma. She took one look at it, then at me and said, "Now I can rest." She died in her sleep that night, her hand still holding mine. Her funeral was simple, just as she had wanted. But I was not the same girl who had once cried herself to sleep in a room that didn't belong to her. I was Riley Hart. I had earned every piece of myself. And the story wasn't over yet. After the funeral, I stayed behind as the others trickled away. A light breeze rustled the pale yellow roses on Grandma Lily's coffin. I stood in silence, clutching the silver locket she gave me when I was 10, the one with a picture of Dad on one side, and now a picture of her on the other. For a long time I just stood there, unable to move, afraid that once I left this place, I'd truly be alone in the world. But I wasn't. Not really. A week later, I was called into the office of Mr. Jenkins, Grandma Lily's lawyer. He was an old friend of hers, kind-eyed and gentle in a way that made you feel like everything might be okay. He handed me a folder thick with paperwork. "Lily planned everything down to the detail," he said, his voice soft. "She left you the house, the savings, and there are small investments too. Enough to keep you comfortable for a long time." I blinked back, tears, overwhelmed. Then he slid something else across the table, a cream-colored envelope with my name written in her handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. "My dearest Riley," it began, "I knew one day I wouldn't be there to hold your hand anymore. But I hope you've always felt me holding your heart. This house, the money, they are not gifts. They are roots. I've watched you grow into someone stronger than I ever imagined. Let this be your start, not your end. Love you. Always. Grandma Lily. I broke down right there in the lawyer's office. With the house now legally mine, I moved back in. It was like walking through a museum of my own past. Every corner held a memory. I didn't change much, just enough to make it mine. I cleaned, patched up the walls, bought new sheets. But I kept her teacups in the kitchen cabinet. I kept her framed embroidery on the wall. And most nights, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, whispering little updates to her like she was still there listening. The peace didn't last long. One morning, while planting blue hydrangeas in the front yard, her favorite, I saw a car I hadn't seen in years pull up across the street. The door opened, and for a moment I didn't breathe. It was her. My mother. She looked thinner. Her hair was darker now, cut short around her face. And behind her trailed Chloe and Madison, no longer girls but young women in their 20s. Behind them was a little boy, maybe 6 years old, clinging to my mother's hand. I stood still as they walked up the path. Mom looked like she wanted to cry. "Riley," she said gently, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry for your loss." Grandma Lily was a wonderful woman. I didn't say anything, just nodded. "We'd love to have dinner with you sometime," she added. "Maybe we can reconnect. As a family." That word, family, felt like a pebble in my shoe. Small but impossible to ignore. "I'll think about it," I said quietly, then turned and walked back inside before the weight of the moment could crush me. For days I debated what to do. Grandma always said forgiveness was a form of strength. And deep down I wanted to believe people could change. That time and loss had softened them. So, a week later I accepted their invitation. Their new house was modest. Nothing like the one they'd lived in when Dean had money. But it was clean. Simple. The living room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Chloe and Madison sat stiffly at the dinner table. Their once sharp eyes now looked uncertain. Mom served roast chicken, my favorite from when I was a kid. She smiled when she placed it in front of me. I remembered. Dinner was civil. We spoke about safe things. Work, the weather, the little boy, Ryan, who turned out to be my half-brother. Dean was polite, quieter than I remembered. Chloe talked about her job as a receptionist. Madison said she was working retail. They seemed humbled. When Mom sighed about a broken water heater and said they were short on cash, I instinctively pulled $200 from my wallet and handed it over. "Take care of it," I said. Mom's eyes welled with tears. "Thank you, Riley. You don't know how much this helps." I wanted to believe it was gratitude. That something between us had started to mend. But that was the moment I opened a door I should have kept closed. A week later, Chloe texted me. She needed help fixing her laptop for work. Madison called about medical bills. Dean asked if I could chip in for Ryan's school supplies. Each time it was small. Each time I said yes. I wanted to help. I wanted to believe. Then I started noticing patterns. The texts got colder. Order. Thanks got briefer. The emergencies more frequent. One night I dropped by unannounced. Their driveway had a new SUV. Inside, through the window, I saw Chloe showing off a brand new phone while Madison laughed over some online shopping. I stood outside, watching them laugh, and realized they hadn't even invited me in. I left without knocking. Something inside me crumpled. The next day Mom called. "Dean's car broke down again," she said in that same sweet tone. "Could you help us out a little? Just $300. "Sure," I replied, drained. She thanked me quickly and hung up, or so she thought. I didn't move. The call was still connected. I pressed the phone back to my ear, about to hang up, and then I heard her voice. Clear. Unmistakable. "Did she bite?" Chloe asked, laughing. "Of course," Mom replied. "Riley always does. Just act a little sad, and she opens her wallet." Madison snorted. "She actually thinks we love her." Dean's voice cut in. "Easy now. A little car trouble here, a little kid's fever there. We just keep pulling slowly. Long game. Then Mom laughed. Not kindly, not motherly. It was the same laugh she used to have when she gossiped with the PTA moms about desperate single parents. As long as she still thinks we're family, she said, we'll never have to worry. With that big house and her fat paycheck, she's our retirement plan. The call went silent as I pressed end. I sat frozen in place, my phone still warm in my hand. Their laughter still echoing in my ears like poison. My mother, my own flesh and blood. The woman who abandoned me, came back, pretended, and then used me again. I didn't cry. There were no more tears left in me. There was only silence. And clarity. They weren't my family. They never were. That night I didn't sleep. I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the city lights outside my window. The wind rustled the leaves of the tree outside like whispers I couldn't quite understand. The pain wasn't sharp anymore. It was something colder, something deeper, like standing waist deep in ice water, too numb to feel the frostbite crawling up your bones. I played their voices over and over in my head. The cruelty, the calculation, the way they laughed about me like I was a mark in some con they were running. Not their daughter, not their sister, just an ATM with a pulse. And I thought about Grandma Lily. How hard she'd worked to build a home where I could be safe. How she shielded me when my own mother would not. She would never have let this happen. But she wasn't here anymore. So now it was up to me. The next morning I dressed carefully, neatly, professionally. Not for them, for me. I pulled on the dark gray slacks I saved for important meetings, the white blouse with tiny silver buttons. I did my makeup soft and subtle. I wanted to look like the woman they never bothered to see. Then I got in my car and drove. When I pulled up to the rental house, Dean's black SUV was in the driveway, and the scent of baked lasagna wafted from the open kitchen window, a fake warmth like a mask. I knocked once. Mom opened the door, beaming like she hadn't just stolen from me with a smile. Sweetheart, come in. Dinner's ready. I stepped inside. Chloe and Madison were seated at the table in designer blouses. Dean stood behind Mom, his arm around her waist. Little Ryan waved shyly at me, clutching a toy car. Tonight we wanted to share something with you, Dean said, motioning to the table. Dinner passed in slow, suffocating minutes. Forced small talk, nervous glances, a script they'd rehearsed in my absence. But I stayed silent, letting them play it out. When dessert hit the table, chocolate mousse with fake smiles on top, Dean cleared his throat. Riley, we need your help with something important. Here it comes, I thought. The house, Mom said softly, folding a napkin in her lap like a prop. It has structural issues. Foundation damage. It's bad. We got an estimate. It's $15,000. They all looked at me, expectant. I set my spoon down gently. And you want me to pay for it? Dean nodded. We'd pay you back, of course. We just need a little help getting over this hump. I looked at each of them, slowly, carefully. Then I smiled. Not sweetly, not warmly, just enough to make their stomachs tighten. No. The word dropped into the room like a grenade. No. Mom echoed, her smile faltering. No, I repeated calmly. And I think you already know why. Dean frowned. Riley, we're your family. Are you? Yes. Because family doesn't joke about how easy it is to squeeze someone for money. Family doesn't laugh about them behind their back. Or forget to hang up a call before revealing exactly how little they care. Their faces went pale. Mom blinked rapidly. Riley, you misunderstood. No, I said louder. I understood perfectly. You used me. Just like you used Dad until he died. Just like you used Grandma Lily when she was too kind to say no. And you thought you could use me too. I pulled out my phone and waved it. I recorded everything. Your little strategy session, after the last call. The laughing. The retirement plan comments. I have it all. Dean's jaw clenched. Chloe covered her mouth. Madison stared at the floor like a child caught cheating on a test. "You don't want to do this," Mom whispered. "This isn't who you are." "No," I said. "It's who you are. And I'm finally seeing it clearly." I stood up. The chair scraped back loudly against the floor. Ryan looked confused, but I couldn't explain this to a 6-year-old. He still had time to grow up better than the people raising him if he was lucky. "I'm done," I said. "No more calls. No more text. No more emergencies. I don't owe you anything. Not money. Not forgiveness. Not a second more of my life." Mom stood up too, reaching for me. "Riley, please. Don't do this." I stepped back. "I did it," I said coldly. 10 years ago, when you let someone else take my place in your life. You just didn't notice until now." And I walked out. I didn't run. I didn't cry. Behind me, I heard raised voices, a clatter of silverware, a child's confused whimper. But I didn't turn around. Not once. The next morning, I filed a transfer request to the Clarendon and Pierce office in New York. A new city. A new chapter. One where no one knew me as the girl they forgot. My manager approved it within the week. My work record was spotless. I was invaluable to the team. Then, with a deep breath and a steady hand, I listed Grandma Lily's house for sale. Hurt. More than I expected. Every room held pieces of her. Every door frame, every tea stain on the counter, every creak in the floorboard when I walked from the kitchen to the living room. But I knew she wouldn't want me to cling to the past if it meant I couldn't move forward. A young couple bought the house. They were expecting their first child. "I hope you love this place," I told them at the closing. It was built by someone who knew what love really was. With the proceeds from the sale and my savings, I found a small apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, a bright space with big windows overlooking the park. On the first morning I opened the window, let the sun hit my face and whispered, "I made it, Grandma. I really made it." And for the first time in my life I was truly free. My apartment on the 17th floor was small, but it felt like a kingdom. The walls were bare at first, but every inch of it whispered possibility. I took my time filling the space, not with things but with meaning. Plant by the window, a journal on the nightstand, one framed photo of Dad and Grandma Lily on the bookshelf, smiling like they knew I'd get here eventually. I didn't need much. For the first few months in New York, I kept to myself. I was rebuilding not just a life but a sense of self. I didn't realize how hollow I'd become until I started filling in the quiet with my own voice again. Some mornings, I'd sip coffee by the window with the journal open in my lap, writing to Grandma as if she could still read the words. Work at the new branch of Clarendon and Pierce was intense, but I thrived in the pace. My colleagues respected me quickly. I was efficient, precise, always 5 steps ahead. That's what growing up under constant emotional landmines does to you. You learn to be unshakable, even when your hands are trembling. But it wasn't all lonely. One day during a quarterly planning session, I sat beside a woman named Sophia. She was sharp, warm, and casually sarcastic, the kind of person who laughed from her gut and never sugar-coated anything. We started talking after the meeting, then over lunch, and before long, we were grabbing coffee every Wednesday morning and walking through Central Park on weekends. Turned out Sophia knew something about family pain too. She had grown up in foster care, bounced between homes, and never truly found a place to belong. "But," she said once as we sat on a park bench watching a group of kids fly kites, "sometimes you don't find family. You build it." She introduced me to her circle, a patchwork family of people just like us. Some had been orphaned. Some had been abandoned. Some had simply walked away from families that refused to love them right. Every Friday, we gathered at Sophia's tiny apartment or someone else's rooftop. We had homemade pizza nights, birthday parties with candles stuck into grocery store cupcakes, movie nights where no one talked about where they came from, just where they were going. They didn't want anything from me. They didn't measure my worth in dollars or obedience. They just showed up, again and again. One night, during a bonfire gathering in Central Park, nothing fancy, just a few thermoses of cocoa and a Bluetooth speaker playing old jazz, Sophia handed me a mug, her cheeks glowing from the firelight. "Family," she said, "is who shows up, not who shares your blood." I looked around at the circle of people, all broken in their own ways, all smiling despite it, and I felt something I hadn't in years: safety, acceptance, a sense of home that didn't require me to shrink. It made me think of Grandma Lily. She used to say, "People aren't always who you expect them to be, Riley. But if you're lucky, you'll find the ones who surprise you in the best way." One spring morning, the trees in the park had just started to bud, soft green sprouting from branches like hope returning. I visited the cemetery where Grandma was buried, carrying a bouquet of pale blue hydrangeas, her favorite. The breeze was cool, the sun gentle. I knelt beside her headstone and whispered, "I found it, Grandma. Found my home. Not in a house or in their apologies, but in people who love me right." A soft breeze curled through the grass as if she answered back. That night, I returned to my apartment and pulled out the envelope she had left me, the letter I kept tucked safely in my journal. I read it again, even though I had it memorized. "Let this be your start, not your end." That line had carried me through so many storms. And yet, somehow, the storms still weren't done with me. A few months later, I received a voicemail from an unknown number. It was short, nervous, familiar. "Riley, hi. Mom. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I was wondering if we could talk. Not about money. Promise. Just talk." I stared at the phone. I hadn't heard her voice since that night at the dinner table, the night I finally walked away. For a moment I thought about deleting the message, letting silence answer for me. But then I remembered what Grandma used to say. Closure isn't about them. It's about you. So I called her back. We met at a coffee shop in Midtown. Neutral territory. The kind of place where you can't yell or cry too hard because someone will always be watching. She looked older, softer, tired in a way I hadn't expected. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly, stirring her tea without looking at me. "I didn't think you would." "I almost didn't," I said honestly. She paused, finally looking up. "I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not for what I said, but for everything I didn't do. For not being a mother when you needed me. For choosing comfort over you." I waited, unsure if this was another performance. "After you left," she continued, "things fell apart. Dean lost his job. The girls drifted. Ryan started asking why you don't visit anymore. And I kept thinking, maybe it's because I broke something I didn't know how to fix." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't offer a tissue. "Not yet. I'm not asking for anything, Riley," she whispered. "I just wanted you to hear it. To know that I see now what I couldn't before." For a long moment I said nothing. Then I nodded. "I appreciate the apology. Do. But I can't go back. I built something better without you." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I hope," I added softly, "you can build something too." When we stood to leave, she reached out like she wanted to hug me. I hesitated, then offered my hand instead. And that was enough. I walked out into the New York evening, the city buzzing with lights and life, and I felt lighter than I had in years. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, just meant I was free. The seasons in New York moved quickly. One moment the leaves were green and full, and the next, the streets were blanketed in amber and rust. Autumn always made me nostalgic, but now the memories didn't sting. They whispered, reminders of how far I'd come. My work at Clarendon and Pierce was going better than I had ever imagined. I was promoted again, this time to senior project manager. My name started to appear on company memos, my decisions discussed in boardrooms. I wasn't just doing well. I was quietly, steadily building a future that no one could take away from me. I used part of my savings to invest in a small creative startup, one built by people like me and Sophia. People who'd come from fractured homes and were now designing resources for kids from foster systems and shelters. We named it Lighthouse, a place to find your way when everything else is dark. It wasn't just business. It was purpose, legacy. A promise to become for others what Grandma Lily had been for me. I didn't visit my mother again. I didn't need to. That conversation in the cafe had been enough. The final page in a chapter that no longer needed rewriting. But one unexpected letter brought it all rushing back. It arrived on a Monday morning. Thin envelope, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten. Riley, I know I don't deserve to ask anything from you. But Ryan's been asking about you every day. He doesn't understand what happened. He just remembers how much he loved playing with you. If someday you feel strong enough, maybe you could write him a letter. Just to say hi. No expectations. Just love. I sat with that letter for hours. Ryan. The only innocent one in all of it. He had no part in the lies, the manipulation. He hadn't used me. He just looked up at me with those wide eyes and called me sissy. So I wrote back. Just a short note. Nothing about the past. Just about his favorite toy cars. His birthday. A book recommendation. It wasn't a reunion. But it was a beginning. A beginning on my terms. Time passed. Sophia and I got closer. So close that one December evening, standing beneath twinkling lights outside a bookstore, she kissed me softly and said, "You know, I think your grandma would have loved me." I laughed, then cried. 'Cause she was right. And for once, the tears came from joy, not pain. We moved in together the following spring. A brownstone walk-up in Brooklyn with creaky stairs and plants in every window. On the living room shelf beside our books and coffee mugs, sat 2 framed photos. One of me and Sophia, and one of Grandma Lily holding a younger me, our heads pressed together, laughing like nothing else in the world existed. Years passed like pages in a novel I wasn't ready to put down. One rainy afternoon, I found myself sitting on a panel for a women's leadership summit. I spoke about resilience, about building from nothing, about the quiet power of walking away from the wrong people to find the right purpose. Afterward, a young girl approached me. She looked barely 20, eyes wide with the same confusion I once wore like a second skin. "Do you think, even if you come from nothing, you can still matter?" I looked her straight in the eyes. "I don't just think it," I said. "I know it. I'm living proof." And I was. Not because I was rich or powerful, though I had both in quiet ways, but because I had built a life where love couldn't be taken from me. A life where I belonged. On the anniversary of Grandma Lily's passing, I visited her grave with Sophia beside me. We laid flowers and read her favorite poem aloud, the one about finding light in dark places. And I whispered to the wind, "You were the first person who made me feel like I was enough. I'll spend my whole life passing that gift forward." As we turned to leave, a gust of wind swept through the trees, and for a second, I could almost hear her humming that old jazz tune she always played while baking. I smiled and tightened my coat around me, heart full. Riley's story reminds us that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who choose you when they don't have to. And sometimes, healing begins the moment you stop looking backward and start building forward. On your own terms. Thank you for listening to Riley's journey here on Revenge Echoes, where the past may echo, but the future answers louder. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments. Have you ever had to walk away to finally find yourself? And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, emotional stories about healing, justice, and the strength it takes to rise again.